The consequences of climate change are becoming all too clear. But who should be trying to tackle it? To discuss the issue, The Economist's Deputy Executive Editor Sasha Nauta was joined by Environment Editor Katrine Braik and Briefings Editor Oliver Morton.
Ollie, can you just help frame this a little bit? When it comes to who needs to do what, how do you think about responsibility for action between governments, businesses and individuals, or perhaps you think of other players as well? Just sort of the meta vision there. Who's responsible for what?
I'm primarily a governments guy. Governments are, especially democratic governments, are governments we elect to do things that need to be done in the public sphere. You can have, and indeed at the Economist we do have, vibrant debates about what the role of a company should be, but it's not clear to me that there's anything like a settled opinion that the role of the company is to make the world better regardless. Whereas in terms of securing the long-term future of its citizens and its future citizens, that's something that countries are meant to do.
Are there any countries that are leading the way, that are sort of showing how it can be done?
Sweden's doing reasonably well, but no one is doing brilliantly.
So the UK is doing quite well in terms of its promises, definitely needs to start walking the walk as well as talking the talk.
The great thing about politics is it's a way to get people from different points of view and with different agendas to agree on some things that they want to get done. And that, I think, has to be the model for climate change, action against climate change in democratic countries. Governments have done a huge amount to make solar power, especially the German government, to make solar power cheaper. It would not have become cheaper without government subsidies in really quite eye-watering amounts if you're German. The idea that governments can just get out of the way, yes, a lot of good people of goodwill will buy themselves solar panels, and they may even, if they were very goodwill, take a capital hit on doing so. But they're absolutely not. But that's not going to be everybody. This is the problem. If you rely on the people of goodwill, you're effectively putting a tax on people of goodwill, and everyone else says, well, the people of goodwill are doing all that, and then it doesn't get done. And what you want to see is sharp reductions in carbon dioxide emissions coupled to vibrant economic growth. That's what you want, because if you can't get those two things together, it's going to be really, really hard to get either one of them separately.
What can private companies do? What is their role, particularly companies that have high carbon footprints?
To see the writing on the wall, the signal is very clear, right? The future is not in fossil fuels, and you have to be completely blindsided these days to think that the future is in fossil fuels. And to be honest, even the CEOs of major fossil fuel companies know this. This is going to be a transition towards a low carbon economy. And if you take, say, corporate social responsibility seriously, then don't make it a little tagline on the side, and actually mainstream that into the strategy of the company.
The other important thing companies can do is come up with ideas that governments will never come up with for things that people might want to consume that will be better for the planet than the things that they are currently consuming. One of the great examples of this is Tesla, and I can go toe-to-toe with many people on criticisms of Elon Musk, but the basic insight that by making a car in a niche market that was better than the other cars in that market and was also electric would allow him to grow both a small amount of market share, but a lot of technological know-how and manufacturing understanding, and a spectacular stock market capitalization, and thus push him into more and more cheaper cars, or moderately cheaper cars, and really change the way that much of the rest of the industry thought about electric cars, because having a company that put them at the center of a high-value business was very different from sort of like having them as the weird futuristic thing that you do on the fringe. And so a company that can come in and disrupt an old market with something that's genuinely climate positive, that's what we really, really look to the private sector for.
Another example that doesn't get mentioned much is Microsoft, right? So Microsoft is one of these countries that companies that has set a net zero target for itself, etc. But what's completely different in Microsoft's net zero target is that they are proposing to not just be net zero between, say, today and I can't remember exactly the date, but some decades down the line, but actually net zero over its entire history.
We've got governments, we've got companies, but what about just us? I mean, just before this call, actually, I had a fight with my husband over how important it was to switch the lights off. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important. He thinks it's very important because it's something I can control. I'd like the two of you to set that right. But personal responsibility, what can I personally do?
I think that most of us forget that we have more leverage than just what happens within the four walls of our house. If you are a CEO, if you are a farmer and you are part of a wider agricultural system, if you work in the oil sector, if you have a solar power plant somewhere, ask yourself what you can do professionally, and then I think your personal influence becomes much greater.
People have an exaggerated view of how prompt and how personal the threats due to climate change are. The important thing about climate change, it's really that it's going to hurt, harm, kill a lot of people, mostly in poor countries. And the other thing to remember is it's not going to destroy the planet, it's just going to hurt humans. And you have to think primarily, although it comes out of environmental concern, the reason for climate action is deeply humanitarian, that you want to make sure that fewer people get hurt than would otherwise happen.
Hi, that was part of a digital event produced exclusively for subscribers to The Economist. If you'd like to watch the full conversation, please click the link. You'll just have to register with The Economist if you haven't already, or you could subscribe to enjoy all of our journalism. Thanks for watching.